Hey, Lou.
Where is he?
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Lou. There we go. Hey, bro. How are you?
How you doing? Wow, what a background, Duan. That's nice.
Bro, our theme is like space, outer space. That's amazing, right? Don't you think?
I think it's great. Yeah.
If you see some of our guys whose teeth are black or they look like they don't have front teeth or whatever, it's probably the background kicking in. Marnie's had one of those before, and it's quite shocking, but it's fun, you know. So, but bro, it's so good to have you with us, man. Thank you. Thanks again for your time. Really, really appreciate it, bro.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for setting it up.
By the way, guys, so this is Lou Phillips. If you can see him, Lou, for the guys didn't join us for our reboot last year, November. This is Lou, and Lou is a maestro. So I wish I had Lou's kind of brain. That'd be amazing. We would all like to kind of be able to answer questions the way that you can, but you've got a real gift to answer some difficult questions, and we are absolutely blessed to have you with us, bro. So I don't know if you can see everyone on the screen, probably not on your side, but anyway, we'll get some questions.
No, I can. Yeah, I can see everyone. I see there's 2 pages of people, so.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, so basically I've explained to the guys, Lou, that what the plan is for tonight. We're going to spend the next hour talking through a few of those questions that we discussed that actually, like I said, came from within the group. And then I've also given the guys a Mentimeter link. So if any other questions come up, they can type it in and I can communicate them to you as well.
Perfect.
And we can see what we get time for to answer today. But so, yeah, so Lou is part of Robbie Zacharias International Ministries. And maybe, Lou, do you want to tell us just in 2 minutes a little bit about yourself, background, all that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Duan, for that warm welcome. I don't think you're right with thinking I have that big, brilliant of a brain. There's far smarter. I bet there's more intelligent people on this call right now. And I mean that. I think I can just give answers is what it is. Yeah, a little bit about me. Grew up in Western Pennsylvania in the United States. I've been working for RZM for the last 3 years now. Prior to that, I was actually pretty much on track to be a physician or a doctor my whole life. That's where my degree is in molecular biology. But the Lord just did a work in me, and I mean, I can even talk about that in this talk today, but that's not what we're here to say. But yeah, I love it. So what I mostly do is travel and speak a lot of times on college campuses, but then also a lot with youth as well. I was actually just recently given the leadership position here in the United States to head all of the youth initiatives with RZIM, because I really am passionate about your age specifically. This is 14 to 18, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal age to be at because you're honestly thinking about the person you're going to be, and the questions you're grappling with will actually, in many ways, can and will dictate what your future will look like. And not to put pressure on that, but I think often so many people will assume that a 14-year-old or an 8-year-old, they're not really thinking about these things that deeply. And I disagree with it. I think you're thinking about things very deeply, and the more we take your questions seriously, the better chance that you actually have to see Christ in all his beauty rather than just seeing religion for itself. And so, yeah, that's what I'm passionate about. I'm really passionate about the topic of sexuality as a whole. So I'm grateful that Duan reached out to me to talk about that. It's something I'm passionate about in my own life personally, but then also speaking about, because prior to working with RZM, I actually worked for a ministry. I traveled all across the United States for 3 years, speaking specifically to teens your age on sexuality. So
that's excellent, bro. So, well, there we go. So we'll unleash you.
Oh, great.
And then, I mean, what you can do, those questions we send through, you can feel free to, kind of approach them any way you want and how you want to start. The first one was about, especially related to drinking and smoking, and is drinking and smoking a sin, or is drugs the one that you should be careful about? A general kind of purity in line with drinking and smoking, and then we'll move on to kind of sexual temptation, that kind of thing. So
sure. Yeah, I think one thing we're really good as Christians, and I'm sure some of you may not even be. I know this is probably a Christian group, but you're probably just floating alongside and you're just doing it because your parents want you to. Or maybe you're just kind of on the fence. You're trying to figure out, do I really believe this? I think a common misconception when it comes to Christianity, even within like Christian families, is it's all about the don'ts. Like it's just, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, and then you live a holy life, right? And what we're really good at as Christians is thinking about making those lines like very clear, like here's a line, here's a line, here's a line, we can't cross it. And some of that's wise. And I'm big on boundaries in my life. I'm big on not trusting myself, because I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we're not that trustworthy. And that may not be the nicest thing to say to you because I don't know you, but I know humanity enough that you probably lie to yourself more than anybody else. Realistically, I know it's true for me. And so this idea that we're actually capable of being our own gods and making our decisions, not only is it foolish, it's just arrogant. It really is. Like, just look at your life, look at some of the decisions you've made. Do you really trust yourself to be in charge of you? I don't. And I've made some really good decisions, and I've also made some really bad decisions. When we look to Scripture, if we come there with a lens like, here's what I want God to be like, here's what his view, this is the view I want him to have on this, and if he doesn't have that, I'm going to struggle with believing in him or wanting to follow him. What you figured out right there is your idol. You figured out the thing that you value more above God. The thing you say, if I don't get this, if you get to tell me something different about this one, then, and let's be honest though, what you really want God to be is you just want him to be you, right? You know, no one, I'm guessing nobody on this call is going to think they're says that they're perfect. I've yet to meet a single person that's ever said that. God, by his definition, would be, right? And so don't you think there's going to be some times where he is going to conflict with you, right? If you're not perfect and he is, why do we assume that we're always going to agree with him? Why do we assume that he's just going to be exactly what we want him to be, and like there's going to be no conflict? It's one of God's greatest gifts to us that he's willing to confront some things in our own lives. And I know this is a really long answer to get it, but I'm just framing all this to get into what I'm trying to say. But I think we can, if he truly is perfect and he has our design and he's created us for a specific purpose and he knows what's best for us, when he gives us limitations, it's not because he wants to see, let's see if they'll really follow. Let's see how much they love me. Are they willing to do this? Because I'm going to make this ridiculous rule just to see if they'll do it. And if they do it, then I know they love me. Like, it's just not the God of the Bible. He actually cares about you, and he limits these things because ultimately we make bad mistakes. And when we make those mistakes, it actually harms us. God's not withholding anything good from you. That's my biggest challenge for you to believe. And I struggle to believe that to this day. But think of the garden. What's the first thing that Eve had to do, right? Did he really say? Right? It's that inner assumption that you and I, every time we choose sin, that's what we're saying. We're like, but did he really say this? And we expect there's like an appendix in the back of the Bible with our name in it saying, well, we don't have to follow this part because we understand things more. God is good. And sometimes his policy or his laws, whatever his commandments, just can be difficult. But if you look to the beauty of them, you'll realize he actually has your best interest. So I say all that to say there's some things in the Bible that are very black and white, right? Then there are some things that are kind of gray. I think it's very clear that alcohol itself is not bad. I'll just give you my own story. I never drank till I was 21 because 21 is how old you have to be to drink in the United States. I don't know what it is in Abu Dhabi, but I didn't drink till I was 21. One, I wanted to respect my parents' rules, and then I also just want to respect the law because I think as a Christian, I'm expected to respect the law as long as it's not going against God's law. And so I did that, and God has given me a disposition when it comes to alcohol. I don't even like the concept of inebriation or being drunk. Some of you will have that predisposition. You'll enjoy that type of feeling. And for you, my recommendation is you need to be very, very careful with alcohol. It can destroy your life, and and I think the reason why God is so big on speaking about what is debauchery, because when you look at the Bible, what does it say about what is sinful? It's saying that drunkenness leads to debauchery. And if you've been drunk or if you've watched people that are drinking, you see what it means. You often make decisions you wouldn't normally make if you were sober. You can't be sober-minded and also drunk at the same time. And so God is warning you, just even hit about this one, statistics on your age sleeping around or losing their virginity. The amount of times alcohol is related to that is in the 80s and 90s. So you lose your sense of you don't have a sober mind to make wise decisions. So that's it. But let's be honest, the feeling that, you know, alcohol can give you can almost numb that pain. And so my challenge to you is, if you find yourself, one, my first thing is listen to your law, whatever the law is. I know that I think, is alcohol completely legal? I can't remember what it was, but regardless of where you're from or what that looks like, follow the law. I think that's simple. Alcohol is not actually the greatest addition to your life. I think it's great, but I think it also has to be used in moderation. We understand that our bodies are a temple and that we're actually trying to glorify God in it. When you compare a Cabernet with like a steak, to me, that's borderline divine. Like, that's God himself getting fancy with design and saying, like, look, these two things go together so well. So there's no sense in me of saying that this is wrong. It's just like, when we use it to do something else, when you use alcohol to numb, when you use alcohol to escape, well, now I think you're dancing with sin. And that's the hardest thing. I think more than likely, some of you should probably never touch alcohol. Knowing your personality, knowing, like, do you have an addictive personality? If you do, you probably shouldn't touch it, because you're going to constantly push the line. Like, for example, me and my brother are two different people. I'm not the one that enjoys it. My brother is. He has had to seriously restrict how and when he will drink alcohol, because he is prone to drink too much. And I think as Christians, every single one of us have to say, how best do I glorify God in my life? And if you find that this one leads to debauchery, it leads you to do things you wouldn't do, say things you wouldn't say, then yeah, I think you need to limit it. The question is, what is drunk? I mean, honestly, if we're going to get down to brass tacks, what the Bible actually says, what is drunk? And the problem is, everybody has a different definition of it. My challenge to you is this: don't try to get as close to, like, we almost treat sin like a fire, and we want to get as close to it as before we get burned, when really God's given us a bench like 10 feet away to feel the heat. Like, just chill. Like, you don't have to get close to sin to enjoy, like, see that he's actually put these perimeters to be, because he loves you and he actually wants to save you from harm. And I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of havoc wreaked because of alcohol. It's just a fact. And you don't be so arrogant to think you'd be any different. So if you find that you can't control that, then I really recommend that it wouldn't be something in your life. As somebody that does drink, I love whiskey. I love red wine. I think they're great. I think they pair well with certain things, and it's awesome. But the moment this thing becomes an idol, from the moment it's used to do something that it's not supposed to, I have to cut it out of my life. That's a real thing. I mean, this is a perfect example of Christ saying, does your right eye cause you to sin? Gouge it out. If you don't know how to control, if you find yourself not being able to control those types of substances, I say cut it out. Now, it gets a little different, though, than when we start getting into other things. Smoking specifically. I can't give you a guideline on that. I would say that you need to make sure that you treat your body as a temple, in the sense that you're respecting what God has given you. I think the evidence of what smoking cigarettes does to you, and I would say this even including vaping, and that would be a big problem here. I think it really doesn't. I think it's harmful, and it's also addictive, right? Addictions are when an addiction is something that you can't get rid of, and it also has harmful consequences. Everyone I know that smokes cigarettes is addicted to it. It's not like a casual thing. Like, so I don't see an argument for it. I don't want to give you this, it's absolutely always sin. I just want to say in general, like, I can't see the argument for why it's ever good, is my problem with that one. Well, then when you start getting into drugs itself, the whole point of drugs is inebriation. The whole point of drugs is to be high of some sort, right? You can't be sober-minded and also doing those things. Like with alcohol, you can actually have a glass of wine and it not actually affect you, because there's a way to drink alcohol and it not actually inebriate you. So this is, to me, it's categorically different to compare like wine and marijuana, or wine and cocaine, whatever. Those things, not only do we know that they're dangerous, if it is something you're interested in, I would just ask you to think about, why are you so interested in wanting to feel a certain way like that? Why are you so interested in wanting to numb pain? And you might be like, man, I'm not numbing pain. It just feels good. I get that. But I can tell you this, as a Christian, there's something exhilarating about just living this life as a Christian for God. And all of my friends that do drugs, I'm not saying they're not contributing members of society. You can. I know plenty of people, actually very successful people, that still do drugs. But there's still something there, without me reading into the situation or putting words in their mouth. This life's difficult, and there's a lot of uncertainty as to, man, does my life have any value? All these types of things. And I think drugs are a really, really good way to mask that. And we use it as a form of pleasure because, yes, it's fun in the moment, but it also allows us to escape the reality of what we're actually in. And you're going to have to dig deep to actually be real with yourself, because plenty of people will say, that's not it at all. I just like the fun. There's a lot of ways to have fun. Why does yours have to be actually, not only is it anatomically destructive? I mean, I'm not going to get into, I mean, there's arguments as to how harmful marijuana is in general. I mean, you're putting smoke in your lungs. I can't see how that's good. We know medically it's not good. How long do you have to do it for it to be that harmful? I don't know. But anything that's addictive, I would just be cautious of. I don't want to be this legalistic person. It's like, this is always a sin, but I've yet to see a good argument as to how someone could argue that it's good for you and that it's something that the Lord would want you to do. I'm not opposed to hearing an answer that may challenge that. I really am interested, but you have so much there's so many better things to do is what I'd say. You have so many other opportunities in your life to feel the exhilaration of life and all the beautiful things God has given us. I think drugs actually cheapen those things versus actually heighten them. Sorry, I know it's a really long answer, Juan. I've actually don't really talk about that question often, but that would be my answer. I wish I had more. I think we want more lines. I think we want more solid answers because we want to get, but ultimately I think that there's a little bit of gray area there. But when you're following the Lord and you're asking him for guidance, I think there's a reason why probably the Christian men and women in your life that you really look up to aren't drinking heavily, aren't doing drugs, and aren't smoking in general. I'm not saying they can't all, but I'm just going to say more than likely that's probably the case. Model yourself after the people you look up to. There's a reason those things aren't behaviors that they are accustomed to.
No, it's excellent, bro. Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful. Thanks so much. Really, really, really good answer. And by the way, guys, we are recording all this. I mean, I'd say take notes to what kind of stands out to you, but we are recording it and we'll make it available. Then if we move on, Lou, to kind of now more to sexuality, relationships, that kind of thing. The second question that was asked was, what can you do when you are tempted, or what should you do when you are sexually frustrated or aroused? That was this kind of second question. So just sexual temptation.
Yeah, really good question. So a little bit about my story. So I was introduced to pornography when I was like 8 or 9, I think. Pretty young. I had an older sibling. We were hanging out with somebody older than us. I remember. And immediately when I saw like the first like pornographic image, obviously I knew I knew it wasn't right, but it was also enticing at the same point. And there's an addictive nature behind it. I mean, there's a reason why you can have a pornographic addiction and not like a Teletubby addiction, right? There's something fundamentally different happening there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like nobody's saying, I just can't stop watching the Teletubbies. There's something fundamentally different there because sex itself and pornography is by its nature is extremely addicting because of the way you and I were created when it comes to sexuality. I just don't like when people are like, no, pornography is only addiction if you have a certain worldview. It's like, no, sorry, it doesn't work. I say that because for years I justified it because I was a Christian dude. I wasn't sleeping around. And so this was okay. And then the Lord just really had to convict me actually when I was upper teens in college. And the Lord just showed me, it's like, that's actually, how all your friends are sleeping around and you're not. Well, you're just as guilty because you're lusting after women that have no conscious, like you're not there. Like it's all at a screen's distance kind of thing. So I say all that to because saying I really have struggled with sexual temptation when it comes to that. And how to get rid of something like that in your life, or how to, what do we do when we're actually tempted sexually? One of the first ways that I had to put in place to even get out of that was confession. That's probably the hardest step, if I'm being honest, is to actually confess to people, one, your sin, your sexual sin, and also the temptations that you have. And not just like being, oh yeah, I struggle. Like, I think I look like porn, and like not even looking at somebody in the eye. No, like find someone in your life, whether that's your youth group leader, whether that's, I do recommend somebody that's older than you that you look up to, of the same sex as well. I think it can get awkward if you're sharing it with the opposite sex. I think there's wisdom to share with somebody that's older than you, that's of the same sex as you, and you're just sharing like, I really need help in that. So confessing that, there's a reason why the Bible even like commands us to confess our sin, because sometimes it's actually easier to confess our sin to God because we still feel like he's distant. But like when you have to look somebody in the eye and tell them what you're struggling with, it can be really hard. So I think the first thing is that. The second thing is sometimes we need the Lord to actually change our heart because what we desire is off. And I wish that often came quicker. I wish the Lord just would change your heart real quick, and you no longer desire the things in the flesh. You no longer desire things like pornography, but that wasn't the case for me. But I knew that would ultimately be what would change me, is that God would have to change my heart, and I would have to not desire the things. Not that I wouldn't have a sexuality, but that I wouldn't desire things that were so vile, like pornography itself. And the Lord had to do that over time. But over time, how that worked out was, one, I had accountability. And so I had people, and I don't even like the word accountability. It can be used so poorly. Do you have people in your life that can actually call you out, is what I'm asking. Do you have friends in your life that can actually say, hey, how are you doing about this? And have you looked at pornography, or have you done anything with your girlfriend? What's the furthest you and your boyfriend have gone? Like that kind of stuff. Like, you have friendships like that. Because if you don't, I promise you'll justify everything. You'll say, well, I really love this person. You'll say, well, at least we're not actually having sex, all these types of things. And it will, like, there's a reason why in the Bible it says don't awaken love before its proper time, because I promise you, once you start that engine, if you think you have the ability of stopping before doing something stupid, you're foolish. Ask anyone, ask anybody. Like, the moment you rev that engine up and you give into that, if you think you can realistically just make out with your boyfriend or girlfriend on a couch and that not go somewhere else, I mean, it ends differently every time, and you know it. It may have started out that way. I mean, it's fine, but I promise you, it'll go further, and you'll break boundaries that you never thought you would. And you're going to wonder how that happened. Well, it's because you forfeited on this boundary and this boundary and this boundary. But I promise you, those decisions are made earlier on. It's, am I willing to fold on this? Am I willing to fold on this? Am I willing to fold on this? So once you have that type of accountability to it, it really is, this is probably the most awkward thing to do, but it's just a characteristic I have in me. This is something I do constantly. It's like, if I'm actually feeling tempted in an area, I have men in my life that I can actually go to in the moment. And initially that can be one of the most awkward things you've ever done in your entire life. You're like, are you serious? Like, you have to admit to someone, like, yeah, I really want to look at pornography right now. I need to get away. Can we just go hang out? Can I do something? But actually, to confess it, you would be shocked on how much the power of sin is defeated when you're willing to expose it. Like, sin thrives in darkness, right? Well, shed it in the light and it dies. I'm not saying overall, like once. You may have to do this a lot, but it depends on how far you are into, how much you've given into that lust, how much you've given into that sexual temptation before, on how difficult it will be to get out. So I justified pornography for almost 10 years of my life. It was not an easy thing to get out of. It took me years to get out entirely. But I'm so grateful the Lord did. And now I can honestly say it really does feel like God's changed my desires. I'm not saying that desire completely goes out, but it's almost like a joke. Like, it's not like, what used to enslave me, what used to be this, like, oh my gosh, I have this, like this urge, this urge. Now it's just almost like, no, not today. That's not going to happen. It's just like, once God's given you a better thing, and this is the same thing with the thing we were talking about. Once you have a better desire, a better pleasure in front of you, the cheap things that this world actually offered you seem very shallow. And I know that may seem so unrealistic to you, because right now you're in the height of like your hormones going crazy and you're trying to figure out what do you do with everything. Be honest to where you're at. Share with close friends. I mean, even if you have a great relationship with your mother or your father, I mean, and you feel like you can go to them on this stuff, please do. Oh my gosh, if there's one thing I wish wasn't part of my story, it was that I justified sexual temptation for so long in my life. It's not something you need to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be ashamed about being tempted in anything. There is shame though in hiding it and pretending like you don't have it. And this is this comes down to the way we view Christianity. I think sometimes we treat Christianity as this, I got to be perfect. And so I can't share this, because if I share this, then the facade is gone. People know that I'm not good. That's kind of isn't that the foundation of the gospel in general? You're not good. Like, you need saved, you need grace. And that's not to justify a sin ever. It's just to let you know, like, if you think you yourself are going to hold this perfect thing up, you're crazy. The most humble people are those that will admit, man, I'm broken in this area. Can I get help? Can you pray for me? And then the last thing I would say is just, you really need to rely on the Lord and pray. This is going to sound crazy. Do you know how many times I was watching pornography and I was praying at the same time, and like, Lord, would you take this from me? Like, there's no inappropriateness with God. Like, you can bring him into your real situation. You can bring him into the temptation when you're with your girlfriend, you know you're about to do this, and asking, Lord, can you help me on this? Sometimes you've already made the dumb decision and there's nothing you can do because you've given into it. And other times he can. When we can actually really submit to him, I think the Lord can come in and rescue us from really bad decisions. But he's always there, even when you feel ashamed. You may feel shame yourself. You may feel like you can't share that with other people. You may feel like you can't tell your parents, but you can always go to him and he doesn't view you any different. If you are a Christian today, he chose to save you, knowing all the crap you do before he ever saved you. So he's not like regretting his decision. He's not like, shoot, I thought they were going to live this life better. Like, he knows all the sin you're going to do the rest of your life, and he still chose to save you. So don't for a second think that he's somehow like frustrated or like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like, I'm really regretting saving this person. No, it's not how he works. But that grace is what should melt our hearts. The fact that the only thing you can do when you fall in sin over and over, and it's just to fall at his feet and receive his grace once more. I promise you that'll change you. Like, and if you don't think that'll change you, it's because you're not seeing what I'm saying. You need to let the gravity of what I just said, like, sink in. Like, I'm talking about the God of this universe, the one that has every right to actually, for you to keep breathing. He's actually willing to offer you grace every single time you sin. And it's not something that you can leverage or take advantage of. It's something that humbles you. Because if you've ever really hurt somebody, or somebody's ever really hurt you, and you offer them a form of grace or forgiveness, you don't sit there and like, oh, that's sweet, I get to get away with this. You're humbled, and it softens your heart because you're like, I can't believe they do that because I don't deserve that. Put that on a cosmic scale. Put it on the size of like the God who's created everything, the one who, like I said, has every right to take your breath away right now because you're not good. And yet he says, I'll offer you grace. Come. Because of what Christ has done, come, I forgive you once more. That has to be the bedrock of what we do with our sin, because temptation will always be there, but you don't have to give into that. And the more you're willing to fight those things, the more you're willing to put measures in place. Last thing I'll say in this, I promise. I know I'm really bad at short answers. The last thing I'll say about this, like, realistically, what are the things you can do? Like, you need to have an honest conversation with yourself and say, what do I need to do to prevent myself from falling in this? Because obviously you need a changed heart, but then there's also some measures. So for example, for me, I refuse to watch any film that's rated R, something that has like explicitly sexual material. I'm a grown man. I'm 29 years old. You know how embarrassing that can be? Sometimes be like, oh, by the way, I can't watch this film. And friends are like, why? It's like, yeah, I used to be addicted to pornography and I know what those types of images do to me, so I refuse to watch it. Think I care? I don't. I don't care. They can say whatever they want about me because I know what it feels like to be enslaved in sin, and I know what it feels like to be free. And once you are free from something, you will never go back. I mean, it's like trying to, I don't know, it's like eating like a Lunchable versus like a steak dinner. Like, there's no comparison. One's not even food, it's plastic. And you're trying to tell me it's like, no, it's really good. No, it's terrible. So once God does that, so just being realistic, and having accountability in life. Maybe it's, you shouldn't be on Instagram because you quickly go down a rabbit hole. Does that mean you should delete your Instagram? I don't know. Maybe it is. You need to actually, if there's something that you refuse to do, that's the scariest thing. Everything should be on the table. You should hold everything up to Christ and saying, what can I do? What do I realistically need to get this out of my life? And again, that it might seem almost cruel and harsh. Like, why would God do that? But man, when you step into his freedom, when you step into what he gives you, I promise you won't look back. I mean, I don't know how else to say it other than my own experience of saying there is so much more at offer. Like C.S. Lewis talks about this. He's like, we're too easily pleased is the problem. We'd be sitting there making mud pies and not knowing that he offers us a whole vacation at sea. And we're wondering why we're like, no, I'm content. I love this. It's like he offers us infinite joy and pleasure far beyond what sin can offer. And yet sin is enticing. And we're still in that already but not yet phase where God has shown us this, and not until we're fully with him will we fully grasp it. But he's given me, at least in my 29 years of life, like enough to realize he's far sweeter, he's far more flavorful, he's far more satisfying than any sinful desire I've ever had. But it's hard, and I'm a challenge to just don't give up. Don't get frustrated with yourself. Keep exposing the lie, keep confessing your sin, and I promise you sin will lose its power.
Wow, bro, that is so powerful. And by the way, we don't mind long answers. We love long answers there, so it's awesome.
Oh, good. Great.
Yeah, dude,
they're complex questions. I can't give you short answers. Like some of these, it's like, and I get really passionate about it because I know this is so important to so many of you right now, and you probably have nobody to talk to, and it sucks because you're like, geez, but please take my advice on that. Find someone. I know Dwan here would talk with anybody. Maybe, I don't know, I'm offering that up. Seriously, find the adult in your life that you can share it with. Like, and if I know Dwan enough to know that he'll help you with that. He's not going to ever hold something against you.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to take that opportunity. I mean, our whole team, the guys are, all of us guys, like Lou says, and we actually say this to the guys often as well. We really are there for you. So that's awesome. Yeah, that's a really great answer. Maybe to follow up on that kind of, sexual relationship type thing, a question came in through Mentimeter. When it comes to relationships, there is either lust or love, but what if you just like someone or somewhere in between? How do we righteously pursue this sort of relationship?
Oh, it's beautiful. I love that question. Yeah, there's either lust or love. I'm not sure. Okay. You're all ages 14 to 18, right? I'm going to give you, here's my tip of life. More than likely, this is not a blanket statement. This isn't the gospel. This isn't God's truth. I'm going to say more than likely, you're not ready for a real relationship. That's my first thought to you. You may disagree with me. You're like, no, I love this person. All I'm just going to say is most Christian men and women that I know that have like serious regrets and shame came from their teens. Because you're not wise enough to make decisions. God's given you sexuality because your sexuality in full expression is supposed to then it points to marriage, which ultimately points to his marriage and his bride. Like that's actually the point of your sexuality. It's not about your fulfillment. That plays a role. Like when it's viewed properly, there is satisfaction, there is love, there is romance, but the primary, like the foundation to your sexuality and my sexuality is to ultimately glorify God by then reflecting the relationship he has with his bride, his church. Like that's actually your point. Okay. So like, if that is the point and you're sitting there as a 14 to 18-year-old, not even thinking about marriage, because you're just like, oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of like this. What are the chances of you going to be operating that one properly? You can. I mean, I've seen it done. I don't want to, I'm not trying to scare you off. Like if you think you have the spiritual maturity to do it, then I say, okay, do it, but make sure that you're doing it with counsel around. Like you have other people watching it and even adults saying, hey, are we willing to not even monitor? I don't like monitoring it, but like, do you have other people in place to say, hey, I need help to make sure that I'm doing this properly? Because I definitely do remember being the ages you are, and yeah, you just start having an infatuation for someone. And it's past sexuality. It's not simply you want to sleep with this person. I get it. It's like, you really like this person and you want to spend time with them. I'm cool with that. But like, I'd limit the amount of time I'm alone with that person in private settings. Like, it's cool going out in public and doing that stuff, but like you'd be surprised on the stuff you do privately. Even after you'd say, no, I'm a strong Christian individual, I won't fold in that. Again, I know so many Christian men and women that said, man, I crossed way more boundaries than I thought I was going to before I got married. And I put up some strict boundaries. So it's not about viewing the boundaries. Those things are there to help you, but what you want to do is ultimately glorify God in that relationship. And how do you do that? Well, one, you're kind of only given two relationships in the Bible. There's no such thing as dating. There's no such thing as courting. There's kind of engagement. It's pretty much marriage or single, realistically. Because even engagement, there was different. So what that tells me is that regarding women in my life, I kind of have like not very many options on how to regard them. They're either going to be my mother, my sister, or my wife. So until someone is your wife in that sense, I'm going to say treat her as such, to be your sister in Christ, to take care for her, to put her needs first. I mean, this is why one of the reasons why Christ says to love, one of the hardest things I think husbands are supposed to do is to love their wife as Christ loved the church. And then it says it reciprocates as well. So girls as well, treat your brothers in Christ in that same sense. Now, I get it. It's hard, especially when you really like somebody and it's not just simply, oh, this is a cool person. Can you possibly be making out with your boyfriend or girlfriend and that be glorifying to God right now? Possibly. I think I'm more prone to say no, but I also don't think I have the biblical standard to say that. I just think in general, you're probably not doing it for the correct reasons. You're probably doing it because your hormones are telling you this is what you should probably be doing and you don't know how to do anything else. I think really building a strong relationship with somebody as like a friend and doing almost no physicality to it is going to prevent a lot of harm later on. Because if you don't know this already, a very quick way to eliminate problems in a relationship or to mask them is to get physical. It's like sexually, not to like duke it out. Why? Well, there's a sense of euphoria, chemicals are released, and you kind of just forget about the problem, right? What happens when you deal with it with words and relationship? You're going to very quickly realize, is this the type of person I want to be married to? Is this the person I can actually live life along? Or is this just somebody I was sexually attracted to and I thought was fun? So if you're willing to actually build a strong friendship with somebody and let that carry without any physicality until you actually are ready for marriage. And again, if you're sitting here saying, oh my gosh, Lou, I'm not even thinking of marriage, that's fine. You don't need to right now. That's why I really don't recommend a relationship for you, because you probably are going to do something dumb. But if you are sitting here like, no, I do think about marriage, I think then there's wisdom. Take heed the wisdom of people ahead of you. And again, these men and women that are older than you, that are married, that can share their wisdom, and make sure you're actually, don't think you're different. Like, don't think, well, they did it, they didn't understand how I am. And they really don't understand this relationship. Like, we really love each other. Like, I think the best advice anybody can give you as a teenager is bet against yourself. Like, you're going to make mistakes, and the idea that thinking that you're strong enough or you're wise enough, it's just like, it's just so foolish. And again, it's not coming from a religious heart. It's coming from like, do you want to deal with this kind of shame and guilt for a long time? Like, again, when I traveled for 3 years, talking to teens about sexuality, not only did I see it in teens, and I talked to their parents. And do you know how many people in their 50s are still wrestling with crap they did in their teens? Like, there's redemption with Christ. There absolutely is, but there's also consequences to sin. It's just a fact. Like, for example, I'm going to have to deal with the fact that for 10 years of my life, I looked at pornography. Has there been healing there? Absolutely. And I'm so grateful that the Lord would have mercy on me and grace. But there's some images, there's some replays in my mind that I don't know if we'll ever leave. And it sucks. I hate every bit of it, that I may bring that into a marriage when I never wanted to, but I made that decision, and I can't blame nobody but me. And again, God could heal me of that entirely. I don't know. But I can tell you this. I know a lot of Christian men and women that are adults that, man, they still deal with the dumb decisions they made in their high school and college years. And now they have great marriages, they have kids, all these things, but there's still a sense of shame and guilt there. Now, Christ, part of that is wrong. We are allowed to put all of our sin on it. But like I just said, I think there's consequences to it. Sin always, like, not all the storms in your life will be because of sin, but every sin will bring a storm. I promise you that. Like, you don't get to, it doesn't just like disappear. Sin has a consequence. And so seeing your sexuality as something greater than yourself, seeing your sexuality more than just you finding someone that completes you or finding someone that makes you feel good, or something, like seeing it more about like you're on this earth for a limited amount of time and God has given you a beautiful gift that allows you to glorify, like to reflect, to show the world the way Christ loves his bride and the way you're going to love your spouse. Like, that's an immense responsibility. It's a beautiful thing. And this is why I think we can be so attracted to it. We see it and we're like, wow, there's something beautiful there. Because it's reflecting one of the most beautiful truths in all of history. But if something has the ability to reflect the most beautiful truths, just like a pendulum, it has the ability to swing hard the other way. And that's what I think we see just the repercussions of sin in our sexuality and our choices, because we refuse to take his counsel on it. We think we know better, and we think that God doesn't really care, or that he's not actually that clear about sexuality. He's very clear, actually. It's all sin. I mean, all sexual activity outside the covenant of marriage is outside of his design. What is sexual activity? If you're thinking about it, it's probably sexual. I mean, if I'm being real, like, that's a hard line. I know. I don't want to get so legalistic, because we as Christians get so legalistic. But like, yeah, I think if you're remotely sitting there, like, I wonder if this is, you're probably right that it is. But it's hard. I don't want to give you an answer, because I think you want an answer, and I want you to, rather than seeing how close to sin you can be, why not ask the Lord, how do I best glorify you in this? I mean, if you're a Christian, the Lord will give you wisdom. The Holy Spirit is inside of you. Lean on his convictions. And when you mess up, you repent and you revise, because we're going to mess up. And hopefully we have these small little stumbles instead of like falling off the cliff and really damaging and carrying some weight for the rest of our lives. But even in that, even maybe you're sitting here saying, Blue, I feel like that. I already feel like I've fallen off the cliff. The God of Christianity is a God of second chances and third chances and fourth chances. He's a God of grace. And so you never have to worry about that. I mean, you can try and leverage it. You can try and be like, oh, then fine, I'll just live a radical life now and he'll forgive me. You're only hurting yourself. You're never going to take advantage of him, but he will still love you. And he will forgive those who actually repent and turn from their sin and say, will you forgive me? So don't for a second think that you're damaged goods, or you've jacked up too far, or like now your life is going to be ruined. Some of the most beautiful marriages I know of today are some of my friends that had the most busted, most broken sexual past I've ever heard in my entire life. And yet the Lord was able to redeem and take the most darkest parts of life and make it beautiful. Never diminish what the cross can do in your life, even if it's something that you think is too, like, your sin is not too big for the cross. But he does care about you, and he wants you to actually live this life in fulfillment in him. And he doesn't want you to have to live with these crazy consequences, but yeah. Does that make sense?
Great, bro. I think really awesome. In terms of that whole thing, sexual temptation and the question of how far too far, what is sexual sin exactly? A few questions that came up in this group was, what about masturbation? What about self-pleasure without porn? Without porn,
yeah. It's I get this one a lot, actually. So again, if the point of your sexuality, like, let's give a hierarchy. I think the point of sexuality, first of all, is to reflect the relationship God has given us between himself and us. And we know this. How do we know this? Because in Matthew 16, can't remember, when he talks about how marriage doesn't exist in the end. You guys ever think about that one? we don't like to quote that, especially married people. We don't like to quote that verse. It's like, because they're asking Jesus, like, hey, what about, this dude or this woman was married to this dude and he died, and so his brother married her. Who's she really married to in the end? And Christ is like, look, neither know the power of God nor the scriptures, because in the end there is no marriage. All of us should be sitting there saying, oh, wait a second, hold on. I thought this was like this eternal thing. The reason why there's no marriage is the reason why you and I don't do animal sacrifices. Because what was an animal sacrifice? What were they doing? They were pointing to the one true sacrifice, right? In the moment Christ, actually the one Lamb of God, was sacrificed on the cross, he redeemed, like he covered all sin. Guess what? It rendered the rest of those obsolete. They never actually did the saving. They were representative. You want to know why marriage doesn't exist in the end? Because once Christ actually consummates his marriage with his bride, there's no point for our marriage. Because you and I, we're supposed to put the whole point of your sexuality is to point to that. Now, after that, is there romance? Absolutely. Look at the Song of Solomon. I mean, that, if you have not read that book, that'll make you blush. I promise you. Like, it's not PG. Like, you read, you're like, oh wow, I didn't know the Bible was this cavalier about sexuality. It should surprise you actually that God is far more comfortable about talking about sexuality than you or I. That should tell us about our prudishness when it comes to sexuality in general. But you read that, and then another thing that we see, and this is why I'm bringing it up. I know this seems like a weird way to get to your point. The other thing we see is that it's about radical self-donation. Like, it's the giving of yourself entirely. It's actually your sexual experience has actually never been about you being satisfied in it. It's about you actually doing everything for the other. I say all that to say, how does masturbation fit in that? And the answer is it doesn't at all. Like, masturbation is self-pleasure. It's literally the antithesis of the way God created sexuality to be. Now, look, I've heard Christian men and women argue, no, as long as you're not thinking lustfully or anything about that. I'm like, okay. Would love to know how you're doing that one too. I would love to know what you're thinking about when you're masturbating, that when it's not pornography. Because if you can somehow do that and it not be sexual or lusting, I mean, this is why Christ just shot the bar so high up. Because everybody thought, what, as long as I'm not sleeping with somebody that is my wife, I'm good. And he's like, you missed the whole point. Because I'm actually going to judge your heart. There's no room for self-pleasure in the kingdom of God. That's not what we've been designed for. We're supposed to give of ourselves. Now we're broken, and I know that's difficult. And there is no hierarchy of this. It's like sin is sin. I really do recommend never allowing pornography to be associated with masturbation. Is one better? I don't even like the term better. I would say if you can somehow not look at pornography because you can go to that real quick, sure, but that also needs to be dealt with, is what I'm saying. You can't, I think there's no way. I've not seen a good theological argument as to why masturbation is okay. And again, that's not to limit your pleasure in your life it's just like you're twisting. So what is that saying about sexuality? It's about your gratification. It's about the way you want it, when you want it, all this. You're building up your eventual sexual life to be not what it's actually designed for. And if we look at sexuality holistically as to why it was designed in the first place, I just don't see how we can argue how masturbation is helpful or God-given. I think it's actually a result of the fall, and we'll find a variety of ways to twist and contort and pervert sexuality and still claim that it's good. Again, I'm open for argument on that one. Again, because I can't point to a scripture, but this is kind of like the argument people say, like, when it comes to like, there's so many things about sexuality. Like, well, Christ never really talked about that. It's like, yeah, because he gave us one thing to know. Like, Christ never talked about, not specifically punching a horse in the face either, but I can guarantee probably he'd say no, right? Because he's given us enough to understand what he said. When he gives us the standard, the Christian sexual ethic, which is that marriage is between one man and one woman, and sexual conduct is only allowed within that relationship, that tells you what that gives us an answer for the rest of them, because it's actually the most deep answer versus giving us these superficial answers like, well, and this and this. It's just like, no, here it is. Submit to that and you'll see the beauty that's behind it versus trying to find ways around it. And as I'll just be more of my story, as somebody where that's not in my life anymore, it's amazing. And it's so much better because I don't know a single person, this is going to sound crass, but who cares? I don't know a single person that once they got done masturbating were like, it's a good use of my time. Really grateful I did that one. There's always a weird sense of shame and guilt. And it's like, why do we hide it? Why do we not talk about it? You don't have to be a Christian to realize something is off here. And it is off because sex was never about to be one. It was never supposed to be about one person. It's about one man and one woman. And so when we use it, it'll probably do feel off. Even if there's a sense of excitement and euphoria in it. But I've never met anybody who's like, yeah, I'm proud of this. It's like, it's kind of a shameful part of my life, even if I'm not a Christian. I don't feel, again, sorry. And again, I never want you to feel like a shame. Like if you're struggling with it, that's fine. Like deal with the struggle, share about it. Like as somebody that used to struggle with this significantly, don't let the shame carry you in that. I'm just saying, don't justify your sin. It's not like, I don't think you can do that. And you don't need to feel ashamed. Talk about it, confess your sin, and ask the Lord for help and ask people for help. And I promise you won't regret getting out of your life.
That's great stuff, bro. Wow. It's so good, man. It's really, really good stuff. So a few questions came up in the chat that I think you spoke through in terms of, kissing. One question was, is kissing making out wrong since it arouses us? Maybe just like a quick response to that one. My guys.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't think we can realistically say like, kissing itself is sinful outside of marriage. My standard, if I'm being honest, I'm not going to be kissing a woman until I'm engaged to that person. Just because I think the level of physicality of a relationship can increase with the level of commitment. That's kind of like my rule. And I think it's biblical to an extent. But kissing actually does matter. Like I know the world treats it as like, it doesn't really matter. What happens when you do though? Like there's a sense of euphoria. There's this like, why is the first thing that happens at the altar when two people get married, what's the first thing they do? They kiss. There's something about it there. And I know different cultures can be different on this. I'm just saying it is a sexual act and say like, you may kiss your friends on the cheek. You may kiss your parents on the cheek, but you ain't kissing anybody on the lips that you don't love. Or if you are, it may be like that. I get some cultures like a quick bite. You're not making out with somebody that you don't like, aren't physically attracted to. And it's because it does mean something. What exactly does it mean? I don't know. I just know that I was definitely encouraged as a young guy to be like, no, that's one thing God's given us to be able to do before marriage to like enjoy it. I think that's really bad advice. It's scary when we get legalistic about sexuality because you can even do things right and still make it still feel defiling. Like there's a lot of plenty of stories where men and women who waited until they're ready to have sex, but then even after they waited and now they've done everything correct, even in marriage, they still feel like sex is wrong. Like that's not biblical. Like that's not, and so I don't want to make it, that's what can happen when we make it so legalistic. We make everything about sexuality wrong and defiling. I'm not trying to do it. That's not the case. I'm just saying, man, if this is going to be the person you spend the rest of your life with, you're going to have as much time as you want to make out with them. And if it's not the person, you're going to be really grateful that you didn't waste all of that time and sexual expression on that person. And so I say, be careful. I know my rules on what I'm going to try and do. And it's not because I want to be legalistic. It's because I want to actually honor the person that's going to be my wife as much as I can. Because if she's not going to be, that means I saved that woman from sharing a part of her with me when she's going to be married to somebody else. Like it's as simple as that. You want to respect, if you really love that person, you actually respect the distance between you two when it comes to physicality until you actually are committing yourselves. Because you can say you're committed to that person all you want, but until you put a ring on that person, or like until it's at the altar, that's the one time it's like, it is now official. We're by a covenant before God alone. We're saying we're with each other to the rest of this life. Like, then you can actually freely express yourself and not worry about whether this person is going to leave you. You don't have to worry about the feeling the next morning after. Is like, oh, is this person, do I have to perform? Is my body type the right? Like, that's the beauty of marriage. You can actually express yourself entirely and not have to worry on what the other person feels. Now, obviously there's still sin involved in marriages, but like, that's actually what marriage is supposed to foster, is like this idea of, you're not on a performance. You're not trying to win this, like make sure this person doesn't leave you. Like that's for the, and so with that, our sexuality, I think, blossoms. I mean, asking somebody that's been married for a while, ask them, like, when you have that level of commitment and level of vulnerability, sexual ambition and sexual, not sexual ambition, sexual drive and all these things can actually increase, because there's more to be had. And it's not simply technique, because that's what you're being taught right now. That's why every magazine cover has like 5 more tips to satisfy your man. Listen to me, if it was technique, we would have figured it out by now. And yet there's always 5 more tips. We've been doing it since we could, right? Sex has never not been a part of human history. So like, don't you think if it was simply technique, by the way, this is why do you think things like 50 Shades of Grey and S&M are huge right now? Well, because what happens when you're trying all these things and it's still not working? It's like, well, what if we introduce this? It's just more perversion of like, how can we make it? Because if you want sex to be simply physical and not spiritual and not emotional, all that, you're going to go to more physical things that pervert it. So yeah, I'm sorry. I know you really want an answer for kissing. I don't want to give you a specific answer. I told you what my answer is. I'm going to be very strict on those types of things. Because yeah, I think there is a sexual component to that. And if this isn't going to, I mean, if she's going to be my wife, great. I kiss her whenever I want. After that point, but like before then, I don't know. And I just want to respect her, and I want to respect the fact that, making out with somebody matters, and to treat it as not, I mean, you can definitely desensitize yourself to that, but I don't think we should, because I think it's a beautiful thing.
Great, man. Awesome. So, and then the last question, which I know would be great to end with, is just to ask the question, obviously the Christian view on sexuality, on relationships is quite countercultural. It's quite different. It's very different to what the world will tell you. And like you say, you spoke about magazines and everything else. So 2 parts of the question. Number one, how do we help friends that are struggling with this, that may not have the background that we've got or the belief that we've got? Number one. Number two, how do we deal with those who are we are attracted to, who are expecting a lot of things with us that we are not wanting to give because of the reasons we've got?
Yeah. Well, to the first part of that, I mean, to the second part of that question, I really don't recommend dating someone that doesn't also share your values when it comes to sexuality. I'm not saying it's not possible. I've definitely seen it, but I would say probably 19 times out of 20, when I see a Christian dating a non-Christian, they fold, not the non-Christian. And you'll fold on your beliefs and values when it comes to that, because you want to, further that relationship with that person. So it can't, and I do know some examples of where somebody actually started dating this person and then they became a Christian because of it. So it is possible, but again, my recommendation is bet against yourself. You're probably not the one that's going to do it. You probably won't believe me, so you'll probably still try it, but whatever. I'm just warning you. I've not seen it done well very often. It's really hard to, like, because the view of sexuality is so deep and beautiful when it comes to Christianity. Like, and I really recommend for you to really study the Christian sexual ethic. Like, it's not as simple as like sex got to be between a man and a woman. You got to wait till you're married. Like, that's the cheapest view of sexuality I've ever heard in my entire life. And yet that's probably what you've been taught. It's like, yeah, wait. And if you wait, it'll be amazing. It's like, no, that's not the goal. Like, and you could wait and it'd still be really difficult initially. And you might have to, so like the reason why we do this, the reason why we view sexuality is because we believe Christ is who he says he is, and we're in a relationship with him. And when you're in a relationship, you honor what they have to, especially when there's a position of authority, right? We believe that Christ is not only our Savior, he's our Lord. And so when he says to do something, we follow it because we ultimately trust him. Trying to convince somebody of that isn't in a relationship with him would probably be very difficult. So my first point in like how do you help somebody that isn't a Christian is like, you really want them to see Christ for who he is. That's going to make the biggest difference. But in that, what we can do to help is, one, not to be judgmental towards those that aren't living the way we are. To be honest when given the opportunity to speak on it. Like, if your friends don't want to know what you care or don't if your friends don't want to know what you have to say about sexuality because they know you're waiting and they're not, they won't ask you. And sometimes there's nothing you can do. And that's scary. I can't tell you how many friends where I just had to kind of watch them go down a really dark path. And some years later we realize that, and some still on that path. But often when we confront them without them asking our opinion, I think can go very badly, and you can seem judgmental even when you're not trying to be. So just be careful about that. I mean, this is where we need to really rely on the Holy Spirit to use us and to convict us when we should speak and when we shouldn't. But again, realize like that's just one of the aspects of sin in our lives. All of us need God to change our hearts. Like we need to be radically transformed. We need to be born again so that he can invade our heart and change us. I mean, that's what sanctification is, right? The slow process of becoming more and more like Christ. So don't elevate this sin above. The only reason why I think Christians elevate this sin is because I think the consequences of the sin are drastically different, right? We don't treat sexual sin like verbal sin because often it's not the same thing. It doesn't manifest itself in the same way. You don't carry shame because, one time I called this person this and I really feel bad and I can't forget about it. It's like, that one kind of goes away, but this kind of stuff doesn't. So I think Christians have overemphasized the sin because they know the consequences. But in that, people think, why are you guys so ridiculous about it? Like, why are you so obsessed with sex? It's not that. You just want to know that like this is a big deal because it's the one example God has given us to then reflect him. Also, not all sex leads to children, but like sex is the only time God ever partners with one of his image bearers to create another image bearer. Like we think all life has value. We think life has a sanctity to it. And yet we don't think the very thing that creates life is sacred. Like it's kind of ridiculous. If we're going to think life is sacred, we have to think that the very act that creates life is also sacred. And again, I know that not all sex needs to lead to life and it's not supposed to in every case. But the moment you diminish sex from that, you're diminishing the view of what God has granted us there. So yeah, making sure you're not judgmental towards those that aren't listening to it. I see my time with 3 minutes over. Sorry. Wrapping up. Just don't. It's hard. I wish it really is difficult to share it with somebody else, but never diminish your own convictions in your own, like, man, when you fall. So I went to a public high school. Not a single person was falling. I've been wearing a ring since I'm 13 saying I'm going to honor God with my life and sexuality. What does that mean for me now? I'm waiting till I'm married to have sex. That's not the goal. The goal is to honor God the rest of my life. But like, do you know people were doing this in high school? No one. Did initially people respect it? No. But I sure, like, I stuck my feet in the ground and I was respected for it. I also am a fairly confident individual, so that helps with that. But like, if you stick to your convictions, you'd be surprised at what that does to people, especially when you do it in a way that's not judgmental, but you just do it because, and then when they do ask you why, you better provide a really good reason. Don't just say, well, I'm supposed to. It's like, yeah, I think God says this is why, but here's why. Like there's so much beauty behind it. Share them the beauty that is Christ and why he designed sex the way it is. And I think that has the potential of really changing someone's life.
That's so good, bro. I mean, I think we could probably spend hours and hours and hours talking about this, but it's really, really awesome. And so just guys, what we've done, we've noted the questions down. So the ones we want to honor your time as well, Lou, because we know you're busy as well. So we want to say thank you so much for spending the hour and a bit with us. So appreciate it. How do you get appreciation properly on Zoom? Like a silent clap. It's always so funny.
Can I say something real quick? I know I've been talking a whole.
Yeah.
If I said anything that you disagree with or you're still struggling with, like, please. I mean, you can reach out to Juan. You can also get my email. I don't care if you reach out to me on Instagram. I don't care. Like, I actually answer a lot of questions on that because none of you use email. Well, actually, probably a lot of Gen Z doesn't. Where I'm from, like, I get so many freaking messages. Like, can you answer this question? I'm like, send me an email. It's easier. But for real, I'd love to. I mean, I do this for a living. I'm constantly answering these questions. I love answering these questions. I really hope I can be more of a resource to you. But please know, yeah, I care. I really do care about you. I know I don't know you, but I believe you're created in the image of God, and because you have infinite value, and so your questions matter. And so if you want to reach out to Dwan, I know he will. I feel like there's some other leaders possibly on this call. I'm looking at all these screens. More than likely. Yes, there we go. I see Nikki, maybe. I'm guessing you're not Christoph. Maybe you are. I don't know. I doubt that. Yeah, reach out to them or reach out to me. I would love to hear more from you. But But yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. I know I'm just some random American that was transplanted in, but I hope it was good.